What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today I am excited to have author Lee C Conley joining me to talk about his Dead Sagas novels. But Lee, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you doing? You good?
Doing good, man. I like we were talking about on air, man. I am going on vacation tomorrow, and it is much needed. And I cannot wait to put work aside and maybe actually get some reading done. It hasn't happened in months, so it's just been man, turning and burning. It's crazy.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you sound pretty crazy busy yourself, going back through school and with all your extracurriculars, with not only yourself but with your kids, and also writing. And man,
yeah,
how do you do it?
Well, I plan to sleep when I'm dead. That's
okay.
But then I'll just get rose back up again, like some sort of creature out of one of my books.
I know, somebody's gonna need something from you, and you're just gonna rise back and be like, "Oh gosh, now what?"
Yeah, totally.
I have a feeling that's what's gonna happen with me, man. I'm just gonna die, and I'm gonna be like, okay, it's finally at peace. And then so it's like, wait. I needed something else. And just like, oh, my corpse is just like rise and just dread. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I know, we've known each other for a little while. Of course, I had you on TBR Con this past January. Definitely looking forward to having you on this upcoming January in 2022. But I don't know a whole lot about you. I've just known what you've told me and told the audiences have been watching. But, who is Lee C Conley? How did you get into writing? Do you really enjoy reading? Did you enjoy reading at a young age, and you still kind of continue to do that if and when you find time? And then when did you start writing seriously?
Yeah, well, okay. So yeah, I started reading a long time ago, fantasy. I mean, not just generally, Pretty well, saying that I've been reading fantasy pretty much as long as I've been able to read. I really learned to read when I was about 6 or 7, reading David Eddings and Tolkien, which recently passed uncle actually got me into. And then and I always knew that I would end up doing something to do with fantasy. And it's crazy because those years are so important. Those early years are so important because they literally shaped who I am today. Because obviously, I've spoke about this before, this, but some people might not, but I'm a sword fighting instructor as well. So I do a lot of competitions and a lot of long sword fighting and things like that. And I would never have got into that or any of my historical martial arts stuff. I'd never would have got into my history, even the music stuff, because I'm a professional musician as my day job. Never would have done any of that without sort of my love of fantasy and certain little really important turning points in life, which actually revolved around things like Conan and the Lord of the Rings and things like that. So yeah, it's quite, about to say, I start with Eddings, and I'm not a huge fan of these days. Still good, but it just hasn't aged well, I don't think. Tolkien, timeless. You can't fault it. I read it every couple of years. Absolutely amazing. Conan's a massive influence on me as well. And then I got really big into sort of the darkest. Obviously, I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s, and everything was all Spawn, Todd McFarlane, and everything had this darker tinge to it, and everything was cool and dark and edgy. And so I'm very much a product of that. I think the whole scene, the whole sort of grimdark scene at the minute is very much a product of that as well. We all grew up at the same time, liking the same stuff, and we all like a bit of hopelessness and stuff. But yeah, I only actually found grimdark as a genre only a couple of years ago. I've just been doing my own thing for ages, sort of writing a bit of horror, writing a bit of fantasy, and then I sort of came back online. I was offline for a while, and I came back on and sort of discovering all the forums and all the groups and stuff again. And I was like, there's loads of people like me out there, which is great. So yeah, I just started writing mostly horror. I'm a big fan of zombie films, as you can probably guess.
I had no idea.
General horror films as well. Like me and the family, we watch a lot of horror. And I always wanted to write something. I always watch these films and think, but if you could write that in a book, if you can take the cinematics of film and put it on the page, I think you'd be onto a winner, sort of thing. So I always trying to write horror. But I also knew that because I pretty much predominantly only really read fantasy, sometimes a bit of sci-fi, quite a lot of horror, but mostly it's fantasy, pretty much all the time. I knew it was going to have to be a fantasy. So I just dived in writing a horror based in a fantasy world, which I thought was quite done to death. But everyone's been like, that's a really good idea. And I'm like, really? I thought that had been done a lot. But maybe it was the zombie thing that hadn't been, the zombie apocalypse thing hadn't been done as much. But again, it has. George R. R. Martin did it in Game of Thrones. I remember watching the opening scene of Game of Thrones going, damn, all that work. and he just nails it in the opening 10 minutes. But yeah, that's some nice comparisons with those scenes. So that's nice. So achieved the effect at least. And and again, Evil Dead. I get a lot of comparisons with Evil Dead. I love Evil Dead, but Sam Raimi is awesome, and the whole concept of like demons and possessing you, and then the dead coming back. But they're not like, it's not a virus, and it's not like a spell per se. It's more like a demon possession type thing. And there's a lot of that in my books as well. So there's been a lot of comparisons there, and I was more than happy to have those comparisons because they're like, I think my influences shine through quite obviously if you look. Yeah. What else about me? As I say, I'm a professional musician. As I said, I play predominantly rock and heavy metal. I teach today. I've been really busy teaching in schools, teaching kids to rock. It's sort of like I play like a British Jack Black at school.
Oh, okay, there you go. I was about to say
that's basically my job every day. That's what I do. But yeah, I played a lot in bands, toured all around the UK and all sorts. Yeah, I've been professional for now. It's been nearly 20 years. It's been crazy.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been cool. So I have a really fun day job, and then I get to do the sword stuff, and then I get to write books. So, but you got to do what you love. So I literally am that's my my life motto almost. Like just if it's not something I'm interested in doing, I'm not going to do it. Although if I had to, if I really had to, I'd go work at the local superstore or whatever. But fortunately, I have been lucky. So I used to be a cleaner. That's something no one knows about me. I've been a cleaner before. That was in this big old manor house, just driving around like waxing floors and stuff. It was good times. And that's actually when I wrote Ritual of Bone. I actually sat there walking around with my sweeping brush, cleaning stuff, writing the book in my head. I'd get home at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning and then write it all down. And that's how Ritual of Bone actually got born. So strangely, no one's ever heard that fact from me on any of these, but it is related to the book. So quite fun.
I gotcha. So, I feel like you're maybe one of the first people that's ever gone, like, I'm actually doing exactly what I love to do, which is, doing your rock stuff, being able to teach swordplay, and then also writing. Like you don't hear many people going, yeah, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. Because a lot of people go, yeah, I went to college for this and now I'm doing this. And it's a day job. It pays the bills. Not many people are like, freaking love this. Like, I am the UK's Jack Black.
Yeah, I am very lucky in that respect. But I just made it happen and just did it relentlessly. I mean, there were times where I was very, very poor, living in a tiny little one-room place, But yeah, if you just stick it, I know it sounds crazy. I know it's not necessarily true, but it kind of is. If you stick at something that you really want to do long enough, you can make it happen one way or the other. I mean, I find most of like my income isn't from like playing on stage anymore. It was for a while, but now with the family and stuff, I can't be touring around the UK with the girls in tow. So
you can.
Now I'm teaching, doing the Jack Black thing, and it's not what quite I had in mind, but it is that job. So yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, same with the sword fighting stuff. I just wanted to go and fight in tournaments, and now I'm teaching a lot of the time. I mean, obviously you have to stay sharp and you have to maintain your skills, and I still go to tournaments, but it's not the training that it used to be. It's sort of the hobby becomes a job, and there is always a downside to that, but it's still better than any other job I can think of. So it's I'm very lucky in that respect. But you just got to make it happen.
So I'm curious, has anybody ever called you Mr. Schneebly or Mr. Schneebley while teaching?
They've never been that well versed in the film, but they're always like, oh, School of Rock guy. That's what I get, School of Rock guy a lot. And I'm like, yeah, totally. If only I was that funny. Next thing you're going to be doing
TikTok videos as Avengers.
I might get on TikTok and do some like funny impressions.
There you go. So, as far as your writing goes, how has your process changed, since you were cleaning and writing it in your head and then writing it down when you got home to now? Like, has your process changed? Do you still write it all in your head and then jot it down? Or do you actually have the ability to sit down and go, all right, let's get some writing done today?
So when I wrote Ritual of Bone, it just came out. It was sort of what they call panstering in the writing community, which I'm sure you've all heard of. There was a lot of it. I just saw what happened. I had a vague idea of what I wanted to know what would happen, but it just all came out, and it was fun to explore. With Flesh, completely different method. And obviously, at some point in between those two books, I started a creative writing degree at university as well. I wanted to hone my skills. So I don't know if a lot of it was influenced from that, but the method was much more planned. Now there's still an element of the unknown. So I'll have I want this to happen, and I know the end point of, say, a chapter or a series, a small plot arc, but then how it actually unfolds is not necessarily 100% planned. So there's still that element in there. But Ritual of Flesh, there were parts of it because the Ritual of Bone was several point of view parts in different parts of the world, different characters, and they're all separate completely pretty much in a Ritual of Bone. And then in Flesh, it all weaves together. So all those characters pretty much come across each other in the second one, which isn't really too much of a spoiler. I think people were hoping to hear that if you haven't read it, but yeah, so that one had to be meticulously planned in places. I'd know exactly who met who where and what happened where and who missed the other person there, and like the passing and the night sort of thing, and it all had to happen for a reason. Everything had to have a point. And so yeah, that one was meticulously planned. But again, I did just sit back at points and just let go and just write a scene and go, that's really cool. I might find somewhere for that to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely changed a lot on my plot. I've now gone back to the third book, which I can tell you is going to be called A Ritual of Blood.
Okay.
And that one, I've gone a little bit back to, there is a plan, there's a definite plan, but it's gone a bit more to just seeing what happens. So just sort of, there's certain scenes that I didn't even know were going to happen, which there's a couple that I'm really excited for you guys to check out, actually. There's a couple of, I'm about maybe a third of the way through it, and there's some cool bits in there that I think are cool anyway. You might not, but they're pretty cool. I think they're cool. And I was like, where did that come from? Span that, work that in, yeah. So yeah, it's sometimes things change and plans change, And a lot of my writer friends have told me, they have a plan and then the characters happen, the plan goes out the window.
Right.
And there is definitely an element of that, but I like to still stick to my plan. I give them room to maneuver, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
The plot has a room to maneuver. But yeah. So I'm sort of jumping between methods and like embracing lots of different methods. But I learned a lot from university as well, which has been great. But a lot of it's stuff I kind of already did, but it's sharpened it up, if you see what I mean. So I accidentally just sort of stumble onto the right path a lot. So, so that's always good.
I gotcha. So, you mentioned earlier about horror being a big influence and you've been a big fan of horror. So I guess, October is pretty much your month for the year, right?
Yeah, well, that's why you've seen it. If you've seen it on Facebook or social media and Twitter and that, and recently in the last month or two, that's on purpose. That's when I hit my drive. Every year around September, I start the push of and I try and get everyone I'm trying to sort of get it coined as like the Halloween book to read if you're a fantasy fan. Yeah, there are a few contenders, but it seems to generally go down fairly well. It's my time of year, I'd like to say. But yeah, it's a good time any time of year. People have been reading it all year long, but you always get a big surge at Halloween. Everyone looking for something spooky, and it's fantasy fans usually stick to fantasy all the time. So when there's a spooky fantasy, it's sort of that window of time is open. And I like to be like, check this out.
I gotcha. So what would you say are like your top? It's really hard to narrow down. What are your top like 5 to 10 horror movies, and like what are the ones that you watch every single year?
Okay, Evil Dead, definitely. Maybe Evil Dead 2, probably. If I'm going to pick one, really, really. What else is good? Oh, you put me on the. I'm thinking there's like 100 going through my mind. I'm like,
I know. I mean, any of the classics.
Conjuring films.
Are you big like Halloween fan? Are you big Friday the 13th fan? Are you big?
I do like the classics.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
I do like the classics. Yeah, I think out of them ones, I'm probably going to go Halloween.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to pick one, it'd be Rob Zombie's Halloween. Of course. How did I almost forget? He's my favorite horror director, by the way.
Okay.
And my favorite horror film, probably of all time, is House of a Thousand Corpses. It's just a perfect homage to all the horror films. Yeah. And then that whole series, that trilogy afterwards, it just gets better and better. And the more you get invested in the characters, by the time you get to the third one, it's like, you're really with the bad guys. And the bad guys have become the good guys. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. And I really liked his film 31 as well. I don't want to list all his films, but basically all his films are the best films. I really love Alien. Alien's a big one. The Thing as well. Is that really? It's technically a horror film. I suppose it is a horror film. The Thing, but it's not really scary.
People probably say like sci-fi, but it's definitely horror.
Oh yeah, so I don't really mind if it's fantasy or contemporary or sci-fi. If it's scary or it's got some cool gory bits in it, it's horror to me. So,
100%.
I don't care for genre boundaries. But yeah, The Thing's a great one as well. Tremors. I love Tremors as well. That's just a silly horror film. It's funny,
Right.
but I love it. It's one of my favorites. Just my favorite B movie, probably. But I've not seen any zombie films. I'm just thinking of how there's so many good zombie films.
I'm trying to think, what was that other B-rate movie that came out several years ago? I think it had Nathan Fillion in it. Shoot. It's
I
kind
know
of,
what you mean.
it was like a worm on the cover.
The Firefly guy. The Firefly guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great
What's
series.
the name of that movie? I'm gonna freaking lose it if I don't see it. Slither.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I quite like ones like ghostly possession-y ones as well. Like Paranormal Activity was quite good. The footage film, that was quite good. And
have you ever watched
like,
the VHS films?
Yeah, I like them. I like those sort of things. And there's Wreck, which is a great one. That's a zombie one.
I haven't seen that one.
Blair Witch is quite fun. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I quite liked it. I thought it was good. It had a lot of atmosphere. And actually, in a way, you can capture some of that. I tried to capture some of that in the woods, something's after you vibe. And that's a big part of what I kind of generally do. Generally, I've never really thought about that, but maybe that's where I got that from. Possibly. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I love these chats because I find out more about myself than I knew before.
There you go. Happy to serve. So where did the swordplay come from? Where did that kind of start? Were you really into swords? You're growing up, and I know you said reading like Eddings and stuff growing up kind of got you into a fantasy, enjoying fantasy, but like not everybody just like goes, I'm in a sword fight. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, it's definitely come from the fantasy stuff. Things like, Lord of the Rings, Boromir and Aragorn and Lord of the Rings, and things like that. And I don't know, one day I just woke up and literally just went, I want a sword fight. Or maybe I want to be an extra in a film doing some sword fighting. And then I looked into it more and I was like, actually, I really, really want to actually learn how to sword fight and do it properly. And then I just started getting some texts, some sort of I started off with a really old text, which I got off a website, which is actually a HEMA website, which is what I do now. And I just started looking at some of the sort of the German techniques, and I got a book on it, just learning sort of more German longsword stuff. And then I thought I got to a point where I went and found my local longsword club. I found one in my hometown, which at the time there weren't that many around. So I was quite really lucky. We've got a lovely castle and a lovely medieval city where I live in Lincoln. So there's a lot of reenactors and things like that. Reenactment was a path I could have gone down, but I've never actually done. I just went more the martial arts side. And I went down there, and they're an English longsword club. So I started learning English longsword with a bit of German. I still do my German and my Italian. Now, a bit of a sword geek thing to do English longsword, there isn't enough of the surviving texts to do a full system, a full martial arts system. So you have to fill in the gaps with things like German. So we're doing our footwork from German and Italian and things like that. So I ended up learning like 3 systems, which is it's a little bit unusual, but most English longsword people do that. But it's quite unusual. There's not many of us, but it's an unusual thing to do. Most people just stick to one and master that. But we became sort of masters of 3 almost in a weird way. And then that allowed me to then, when I'm going to these tournaments, I can spot a guy I'm fighting. I'm like, oh, he's using this from the Vardy manual, the Italian manual. I'm going to use this German move to counter it. And I became quite good at recognizing what style people use and then how to counter it with other styles. And then it ended up with a big rack of medals. And I was like, yeah, this works. And then I became a teacher. And but yeah, it was literally originally from the fantasy. And I just on a whim just thought, I want to learn to sword fight. So there was no single triggering moment. It wasn't like a reenactment or anything like that. I really wanted to learn. I always knew I wanted to learn how to use a sword. And one day I just went, I'm going to do it. And I just did. And it was a great idea. So I recommend it. Pick up a sword and learn how to use it. It'll change your life.
I feel like we just don't do that stateside. Like there's just not like a club you can just go to and be like, yeah, we're just going to sword fight for a couple hours,
There actually are loads. There are loads.
Are there
in the
really?
last 5 years or so, most towns, big towns, a lot of small towns in the States have what's called a HEMA club now.
I'll have to
Google it and have a look. I bet you there's somewhere not too far from you. And even if you message me afterwards, I've even got a list of like everywhere that's currently active in the States or Europe. So we can figure out where your nearest club is and see if it's possible.
There's a HEMA alliance.
Yeah.
What is life? Okay, I'll have to look it up. I thought all we had like in Alabama was like axe throwing. I thought that was like about
no, there's all sorts. It's insidious. It's got into everywhere where sort of a European culture has, you know, existed or come from, in your case, in the States. And it's there. So it's all over, you know, Spain, Italy, all around Europe. It's huge in Russia and in Eastern Europe. England, obviously, we love it here because we love swords and castles. And we actually do. That's actually true. We love them. Everyone in England loves castles and swords.
You just grow up just having this, you know, inherent love for medieval
where I grew up, over the road, we had this beautiful, huge red brick castle that belonged to Oliver Cromwell. And then when I moved to Lincoln, my back wall was Lincoln Castle. So it's like we've literally, my house, we nicknamed my house Castle Shadow because it was in the shadow of the castle. We actually grow up around it. It's just here. It's just right out there. I can literally look out my window and I can see a castle right now. It's just there. So it's
it's there. You can't see it, but it's there.
It's dark now, but normally I look that way and I've got this huge cathedral and a castle on the hill. It's crazy.
So do you I think go ahead.
I think I like to stay near them because of, you know, like my character, you know, like I love that sort of history and stuff. So I wouldn't move to a town unless it had a good castle. So
a number one requirement. I don't care how much space is in the house; it has to have a castle. So, do you have like a like a vast collection of weaponry, or does it mostly stay, I guess, at your club, etc.? So you don't have to bring it back home with you.
I have quite a few swords, actually, just over here. We have quite a nice armory at our club because obviously we need to keep swords for all the beginners. We have like 20 people turn up. We need 20 swords. Right. But then they don't touch my swords, so I bring them all home. I keep them clean. I might grab one in a minute, actually. I'll just have to nip off camera and come back really quickly. But yeah, I've only got 3 or 4 at home here, but they're my best ones. So I've got my saber there. 2 long swords and what's called a feather, which is a feather sword, which they use in tournaments, but it's either a long sword or a feather. It's basically a long sword, but tournament safe sort of thing.
Gotcha.
It's a historical weapon though from the 16th century. It originated in Germany, hence the feather sword's name. But yeah, very interesting. I'll grab some in a minute actually, if you don't mind me just dashing off very quickly.
Yeah.
I'll do it right now. Check it out.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I always like sword demonstrations.
Okay, well, I can't really demonstrate in my little thing, but here is this is my 30. They say it's called 1300 to 1500 ringek sword, but it was actually around 15th century. But it's very nice, very long, very shiny. I need to give it a clean. It's got some notches from last night, so we were going pretty crazy last night. But yeah, and it stands about as high. If I stand up and I'm about 6'1", it stands up to my armpit.
Wow.
So yeah, they're quite, but they're quite light. You can get a lot of play with them, and they're quite cool. Yeah, that's my favorite one. This is one I fight with the most. So I don't know where to put it now.
You have to hold it the rest of the interview.
I'm just gonna have to hold it the whole time we talk.
Yeah. So when you started writing A Ritual of Bone, when did you start really realizing I'm gonna just go ahead and mesh fantasy and horror together? Like did it always start out that way? Did you start out just writing a horror novel and you're like, I'm gonna add some fantasy elements to it? How did it really come about?
It wasn't an intentional thing. I just wanted to write. I knew it was going to be a fantasy book. Okay, so I was going to write fantasy, but I watch and love and read. I probably watch a lot more horror than I read, but I think I was watching like Vikings at the time and then like The Walking Dead. And then I was just like, imagine if you put these 2 elements together and then like, imagine like Rohan or Gondor in Lord of the Rings. Yeah, but like with Vikings, like in a Viking sort of, mash them 3 together. Then Walking Dead happens, and you're there with all these horror elements and stuff. And I was like, I love horror and I can take all these bits from the Evil Dead. I can take all these bits from these films that I find really cinematic and amazing and then try and put them into my fantasy novel. So yeah, I knew it was going to be a fantasy, I think, at first. And I didn't really think I'm going to blend 2 genres together. I didn't think like that at all. It was just, this is going to be cool. I'm going to write this. It's going to be scary and gory, but it's going to be a fantasy. But I didn't really think I was crossing boundaries or doing it. I was just doing what basically came natural to my mind. But now I look back at it, and if I pick it apart with my English literature sort of a university mind, I've totally blurred 2 genres together without really realizing. But yeah, it wasn't an intentional thing. It just kind of came out that way. But I I was watching a lot of zombie stuff, watching a lot of horror films, and I was reading a lot of Stephen King. I was reading Dark Tower at the time. And I remember the day I was reading. Now, I'm no Stephen King. Before I say this, I was reading Stephen King, and I went, closed the book and went, do you know, I could do that. I could write a book. And I remember I'm going to start writing. I was writing a load of short stories and things. So I was like, I'm going to write a book. I can do this. This prose is amazing. I know I can do that. Nowhere near as good as him, obviously, and a different thing completely. But I just had this click. I went, I know I can do that, and I just did it. I started writing, and I'd say we were touring at the time, and I was in a band called Friction, and we were going. I had a little cleaning job in the morning to sort of supplement the wages, if you see what I mean. It was quite good on tour, but touring bands don't earn a huge amount. But we were playing 5 nights a week, sometimes 4 or 5. And I was doing my cleaning in the morning, writing some stuff, going to sleep, gigging at night, and that was my life until I met my wife. That was literally what I did every day. Or practiced when we weren't gigging, you know. And yeah, it just came out that way. It was crazy. But it wasn't an intention. It was just, I really like the horror. I really like the fantasy. And it just seemed really natural to make a really spooky fantasy book. You know what I mean? I didn't want it to be too fantasy. I wanted it to be quite sort of, I was reading a lot of Bernard Cornwell at the time. He had a Saxon, Uhtred, Saxon story, and Last Kingdom, and things like that. And I wanted it to be quite sort of realistic. So there's very little magic, if any, in my books. It's even debatable if what happens is magic. So you could almost say it's low fantasy. But I suppose it is, a little bit magic-y.
All the genres, Lee. All the genres.
Yeah, I just smashed them together with abandon, you know.
So your series is called the Dead Saga. So can you tell the audience who maybe haven't checked it out yet, what is the Ritual of Bone? What is it about?
Okay, well, the subject, the Ritual of Bone?
The book. The
book. Okay, so there'll be some spoilers in there. Yeah. So Ritual of Bone is, how do I start? It is essentially a single tagline. It'll be a zombie Norse-inspired fantasy world with a zombie apocalypse happening. It's basically about a series of little characters who unlock a secret they shouldn't really know, which basically returns the dead to either a corpse or you know, it might try and attack, you know, the person and possess them and stuff. It's like an evil force, almost like Evil Dead a little bit. And then it's not like a huge outbreak or anything. The first book is very much a build up of atmosphere build up. That's amazing. My daughter can whistle. That's great. Thank you. She's been trying to do it all week. Anyway, but yeah, it sort of builds up slowly, and it's got these warriors who are very noble and very honorable, and then they don't know what's happening, and things are coming out. The monsters, no one believes them. There's characters all around the country, different things going on. And it's basically just a huge build-up, a big setup with plenty of action and plenty of really atmospheric horror in there to the wider events of the series. It's like a nice introduction to sort of the world and gives you an idea of what's going to happen. So.
Okay. And then, so, you know, we'll go ahead and turn to A Ritual of Flesh. So that beautiful, beautiful hardcover.
You got to turn it around a bit. Turn it around, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I gotta show the back.
I love that. I love that guy there. He's my favorite.
So, what can readers that have read A Ritual of Bone expect in A Ritual of Flesh?
Okay, so A Ritual of Flesh and A Ritual of Bone were initially one book. Okay, and it got to a point in Ritual of Bone where I was like, "This is huge. I'm gonna have to like cut this off here." So there was a point where everything naturally sort of. It seemed to stop. It naturally came to an end, but I was still quite a lot done. And so I had to then finish the opening of this this story. So Ritual of Flesh is the culmination of everything from A Ritual of Bone. So all the plot lines weave together. A lot of people noticed that it's all separate in Ritual of Bone, separate things happening in separate places, all relevant, and all its own story, and all, I think, hopefully all entertaining, but they all weave together and they all culminate in a single place, and it all comes together. And then, without swearing, it hits the fan, basically. Everything just goes nuts. It's quite fast-paced. Oh dear, what's happening in there? The chaos of my book is being reenacted now. But but yeah, it just goes crazy. There's lots of action, violence, some horrible things happen, which I hope don't reflect too badly on me, but some absolutely horrible things happen in that book. But it's great.
Awesome.
Maybe that reflects badly on me.
Right. So and so then I know you've announced the title for the last book, Ritual of Blood. Can you can you talk anything about it? Is it going to be the last book in the series? Do you plan on continuing the series? And then if you're planning on continuing, do you have an idea of how many books that you're going to do in the series?
Okay, so I have a plan. It's not the last book in the series.
Okay.
It is the second half of the first two are a huge setup. It all kicks off after two. The third book, and there is going to be a fourth book, are the latter half. So, it all starts and it's all got to finish.
Right.
And the third one, Ritual of Blood, is it's interesting. It's the one where I've been waiting to write this book for a long time. So a lot of the initial ideas I had were like these, almost, as I said, I was watching The Walking Dead, these like Walking Dead survival aspects, like a guy's hiding in the woods, there's undead around, and like I finally get to do all that because obviously things have hit the fan. You'll have to find out how and read that one behind you. but yeah, so there's an awful lot of, it literally is action from the first go, lots of horror, lots of sort of that tense, they're being hunted sort of atmosphere, like there's a lot of nasty things around them, and they're scared, and they're out there in the middle of it all. They don't know what's going on, and they have to try and get through this stuff. Certain people are being chased, and certain people are chasing. We have the Stone Men from the first one. They're in there because a lot of people commented that I'm sorry if you haven't read Flesh, but they're not in Flesh. They're mentioned and they're explained, but they're not in there. They are back in this one. So basically, again, we have a culmination of the greater threats to the overall series. A lot of the overall threats that have been talked about and that you see glimpses of in the first one, it all comes together in this one. And then the fourth one will then be the resolution, hopefully, if it resolves. But it will resolve. But whether it's going to be good or bad, who knows? But I know.
Oh, I like that. If it resolves, but it probably will. But it might not. Well, it will.
It does appear, because I've already taken some sections out and gone, that shouldn't be in the series now. It's an extra bit that, I basically edit it out. But there is scope for a few extra little stories. So there might be a few standalones. There is going to definitely be a standalone, which resolves around, now most people have read Flesh. If you're watching this, you've probably seen, Red Bone already. You've probably seen it. There's, without giving any spoilers, there is a short story I'm working on at the minute, or maybe a small novella that revolves around the events at high passes. So if you're curious about what goes down at the high passes that you didn't read about, you will find out about that and what exactly happens to everybody involved there and their actual fates and how it all ends up, and the dog and all that stuff. You'll know what I mean if you've read it. So yeah, and that's going to be in there. But I thought about putting that in this book, but I'm not. And there's a few other plot lines that I could maybe play with, but I think there will be scope for maybe even an unrelated. I've got a plan for maybe even completely unrelated to the main characters in the main series. Once events have transpired, there are somewhere else a story might happen in the world. So there will be the main series of 4 books, and then there may be a couple of standalones with a novella that does link into the main series. But the standalones might be completely separate, different characters. You might see a cameo for a brief appearance, but generally I've got a plan for a whole separate story. But once I've established the world and destroyed the world, I can then put some cool stories in there, what happens and stuff. So, but yeah, there's definitely scope for more. Okay. And that's just my Dead Sagas project. There are other projects in the works too. So yeah.
Awesome.
Busy.
So have you had the time or the opportunity to read anything recently that you'd recommend?
Definitely. Right now, I haven't actually finished it. So, and I know the ending is going to be amazing. Right now, I'm reading Symphony of the Wind by Stephen McKinnon. Now, I've had this book for ages on my TBR pile, and I've just been like, I need to read this book because he's a really nice guy as well, and it looks really good. And I've just been reading. I started reading it. It's absolutely fantastic. So that's amazing. I recently read a couple of authors I've been working with recently. I've been reading all sort of my friends' books and like people I work with books and people I've been associated with. So I read Damien Larkin's new sci-fi, which is the sequel to Big Red. It's called Blood Red Sands. And if you like military sci-fi, it's amazing. Really, really good. I read my friend J.E. Hannaford's debut novel called The Skin, which is like a nautical mythology sort of fantasy. Got like selkies and sirens and things like that. It's really, really good. Really enjoyed that. My friend C.F. Welburn, I read it, finished off I started the Ashen Levels like 2 years ago and I only read a bit of it. Now I've just finished the whole thing. And again, I love that guy's writing. His prose is amazing. And it's a pleasure to be friends with him, but he's so good. And he's just released a new book as well, which looks amazing, which haven't read yet, which I have got. I read, if you like comedy fantasy, you know, the Pratchett sort of vein, and a lit RPG crossover, there's Jamie Edmondson's, if I say this in the right order, Grim Og Dog, or is it Og Grim Dog series? It's the
I know what you're talking about. I can never
We 3
remember
and Me
either.
is the series. If you type in We 3 and Me, you'll find the series. And that's really funny. There's some laugh out loud parts in there. There's a goblin called Gary, and I don't know why, but I found that incredibly funny. I just started sitting there chuckling to myself, and the wife's like, "What are you laughing at?" I was like, "There's a goblin called Gary. Gary the goblin."
It's kind of like having a dog named Kevin.
It's great. What else? There's been so. I've read a lot of good books. I think I've read more this year than I've ever read before. Because I've had all my university books, and I've been reading like Shakespeare, Thomas Kidd, and all these classics, and then mixing that in with like all my fantasy stuff I usually read. I've read nearly 40 books this year, which is crazy for me. I don't usually read that many. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks. I've really, really enjoyed the Warhammer 40,000 books, the Horus Heresy novels. I've just burned through the first 4 of them, and they're absolutely amazing. So I'm a bit of a Warhammer 40,000 nerd. I love them. It's great. I'm painting it, I'm playing it, I'm reading the books, I'm living the life. It's great. But yeah, they're really good. So if you've not read them and you do like that universe, definitely read them. But yeah, there's some good recommendations there.
Awesome.
They were all really good as well. It's been an embarrassment of riches for good books the last couple of months.
It really has. It really has. In the past few years, man, if you ever say I've read everything, you definitely haven't. You're not looking in the right place, because oh my gosh, just every week there's new stuff coming out that you just have to just keep adding to the pile.
You know, I haven't read the new Abercrombie books, and I need to read those. And there's like big name books that I just haven't got to yet that I really need to read. But I've just been rolling around happily in all this indie stuff, and it's been amazing. It's been, there's some absolutely stunning books, but I need to check those out as well. And there's a new John Gwynne book. I love John's stuff. Absolutely amazing. I need to read his new one as well. I've got it on the shelf, ready to go. But yeah, it's just never ending, isn't it? It's good. It's a good thing. So
I'm curious.
I remember a couple of years ago, just before I got back into the internet thing, like I said earlier, I was getting to the point where I was like, what do I read? I've read everything in my collection. Right. So let's go back online and see what the cool kids are reading. And it was both an amazing idea and also a very bad idea, because I am now swamped in this amazing stuff. Sorry, yeah, I just want to put that.
No, you're good. No, as we all are. I'm curious. Have you ever, kind of wanted to do the Nicholas Eames things where you bring music into your fantasy world? Being a rock star, being a rocker for so many years, like has adding music into your fantasy books like something that you want to do at some point in time?
I have. And that's all I'm going to say. But there's hints of it. There's hints of it in Flesh. If you think about it, I know you've read Flesh. There's hints of it in Flesh. If you look at the character Seth, and he's playing his a lot of music, and there's a lot of that side of music. But there is, the music definitely makes a big comeback, and it's definitely a thing. It's an important thing as well. I couldn't leave one of my life's loves out of my debut series.
Right.
That music, it's in what I'm writing right now. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay. Well, Lee, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, to talk about Ritual of Bone, Ritual of Flesh. Definitely looking forward to checking out Flesh here soon. Again, like I said, I'm going back through Bone. I really enjoyed it when I read it. It was earlier this year, last year. So now I'm definitely looking forward to Flesh as well. Everybody, you can go grab both of the novels out now. It's called the Dead Sagas. So great Halloween read. If you enjoy fantasy with a side of zombies, it's fantastic. Lee, best of luck with everything you've got going on right now. Best of luck with book 3. And I'll see you in a couple of months for TBRCon.
You certainly will. I'm looking forward to that already. So great.
Absolutely.
And thank you for having me, Stay. It's been a great chat.
Definitely, man. Well, we'll talk soon. See ya.